morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are tuning in from. Thank you for checking us out. We got another beautiful conversation today. Today, we're going to be talking about burnout. Yeah, burnout, which is quite interesting. I know we had a previous episode with Dr. Sheila Patel addressing how to prevent burnout, more or less from a clinical perspective. So I figured today we do a little bit of pivot, take a pivot and say, okay, so maybe we weren't always that successful in terms of preventing burnout, or maybe we're already burned out. How can we rekindle our spark, our inner spark? How can we kind of find that joy that went missing because we went through a phase of burnout? And so I figure who better else to bring to the conversation than someone who is not only an Ayurvedic practitioner and coach, life coach, also a total health and well-being coach, a meditation teacher, and the CEO and founder of the Mindful Living Space, then my dear friend, Ms. Bonnie Bartlett. So I want to welcome Bonnie to the conversation to have some really soulful and thought-provoking conversation about how do we rekindle our inner spark once we've gone through burnout. So Bonnie, peace and blessings, and welcome to the conversation. How are you?
I am great this morning, Andre, and I am really grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me on board.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm grateful that we're able to have this space together to talk about something that's so important. I was reading a study from McKinsey that they conducted last year, and it was over I think 30,000 global employees, and they found that over 20% of the global workforce is dealing with some semblance of burnout, whether that's cognitive and emotional impairment, distancing from your role or your position, or just flat out exhaustion. That's globally, and of course, those numbers vacillate depending on the geographic location. But I feel like burnout is something that is like a silent epidemic where people are going through it. We're not talking about it enough and not coming up with ways and solutions to help people, one, to prevent it, and two, if you are experiencing it, how do you find that spark? So I'm gonna reach out to you and ask you, I leave it in the hands of the professional. You deal with people on a day-to-day basis. And I want to just ask you, one, can you help us just get our arms around what is burnout?
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, burnout is we all have a little bit of, you get tired from the week, you get stressed from whether it's home life or work, whatever those stressors are. Burnout is when your system goes into a complete overwhelm and it can't come back from it. It gets to a point where the stress and overwhelm becomes bigger than you.
Mm, mm. So you feel like you don't have maybe the resources or maybe like the skills or the ability to kind of to deal with all that is I guess you're being inundated with.
I think the challenge is that, I don't know that we don't feel like we have the resources to deal with burnout, because I
Mhm.
think the biggest challenge is a lot of people don't recognize it.
Mm,
So I think that where we do have the tools, we forget, because when you think about it, when you are overwhelmed,
mhm.
it's hard to come back to that center. And the longer that we stay in that burnout stage, the farther we get from that center and the harder
Mm,
it becomes to come back.
mm. That's a great point. It's a great point. It's almost so it speaks to the importance of self-care and all of that, right? And I think that's quite interesting in our culture. We're known for hard work, right? I mean, we're promoted. It's kind of like a really career focused, work driven society. And so how do we, knowing what we know now, right? Like we don't have an infinite well that we can always draw from, right? That we have to have we're aware of needing balance in our life. So how do we kind of reframe it to make sure that we're checking in and we know, okay, so yeah, I'm heading towards, potentially burning out.
I think the best analogy I've ever heard is if you think about your car, right? You've got to
Hmm.
remember to fill up the gas tank,
Yeah.
because if you don't fill up the gas tank, you're going to not be able to drive.
Right.
your body is the same thing. You've got to keep your gas tank full. You've got to replenish your energy. You've got to replenish your spark, if you will, to stay centered.
Hmm.
And I think society is becoming a little more aware of self-care, a
Correct.
little more aware of we've got to start taking care of me first so that I can have the energy to take care of everybody else that needs to be taken care of. Because you can't give 100% if you don't have 100% to give.
That's right. That's exactly right. I love that analogy. I love that analogy. It reminds me of one that I heard in regards to meditation, right? Saying that you don't have time to meditate is like a driver saying you don't have time to pull over and get gas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that, meditation is a great tool. If
Mhm.
you can even take 5-10 minutes a day to get centered, to get still, and just listen to yourself,
Yeah.
then that gives you so much more energy throughout the day to stay a little closer to that center, to stay a little more in touch with your spark.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Meditation is for me, it's a cornerstone of my daily practice, just to take a few minutes, just a few minutes and check in, right? We talked about like not being able to recognize the symptoms of burnout, right? And I think that that daily check in just makes you more just aware, like, oh, you know what? Maybe I needed a little bit more rest. I fell asleep during my meditation because maybe I needed a little bit more sleep. My body
Exactly.
needed to release that stress.
Right. And I think that that's where, and even, people say, well, I don't know how to meditate. All you need is a little bit of silence.
Hmm.
Um, obviously, we can't really silence our minds, they don't ever really go quiet, but just allowing them to be mindful of what's going on in our heads, what's going
Hmm.
on in our bodies, so that we can start to identify that something's wrong, because that's the first step. If you feel a discontent, if you
Hmm.
feel maybe unfulfilled in your life, you don't know what your purpose is anymore, that's the time to check in, see what's going on.
Check in. Check in. I love it. To your point, I believe, prioritizing self-care has become more important. In light of this research, I mean, it does kind of give us a little bit of a baseline, but I think sometimes these numbers are lagging, right? That people have developed a better practice and a better awareness of how to one treat ourselves, and that determines and impacts the way we show up in our jobs and our families and our communities. And I love how we're just coming off of the Olympics, and we had a chance to witness Simone Biles. One of the greatest Olympians ever, yet alone one of the best gymnasts ever. And in the middle of her trying to get, I think he's like pursuing 11 different medals in gymnastics, she takes a moment and just starts meditating.
I loved that. Yes.
I was like, she is at the very apex of her profession. And she said, you know what? In all of this, I still have to take time to check on myself and make sure that I'm well, that I'm well. And for me, that was just such a beautiful example. My daughter's a gymnast. And so I can point to that. I was like, listen, you learn from the best. And she's setting such a beautiful example and showing us the importance that, listen, no matter what we're doing, we still have to take time to check in on us and make sure we're good from inside.
I think you're starting to see a lot more of our leaders, a lot more of even our business leaders, our success coaches, our
Mhm.
executive coaches. You're starting to see them talk about self care, talk about that mindfulness, talk about what are you doing? Who are you with? What are you focusing on?
Mhm.
Because everything that we pay attention to expands in the universe. And so we've got to pay attention to what we're paying attention to.
Yeah, I love that. You hit the nail on the head with that because it's funny because I've been and I'm sure you as well been to a lot of different personal development retreats, and where you're there and these different parts of the world, and you see high performing professionals show up at these retreats, and I know they're executives and leaders, and they understand the importance of being able to take care of yourself and offer yourself healing and all the different modalities that you get at these retreats. But I still think it's particularly in corporate America, we have a partition, right? Because it's like like I could say mindfulness, but meditation to some people still feels a little bit icky at times, right? And so it to me it speaks to the fact that there is a little bit of a division or a fracture, if you will, in how we provide and offer healing to ourselves, but it doesn't often filter over into our professional life, right? It's almost as if it's not a holistic approach. And I know from being in these, retreats with executives, they do that themselves. But I don't necessarily know if it carries over through the entire organization's intelligence and their culture. I think we're still kind of building that bridge to make sure that people can feel comfortable and share all the different ways and means by which they offer themselves care and love. So that was just an interesting observation. Have you noticed anything like that in your practice?
I think there's a lot of that. I think that as you get, like we just talked about, the executives, the leaders are talking about their self-care, but as you get farther down the ladder,
Hmm.
as they say, stuff runs downhill, right?
Yeah.
As you get to, your mid-level management and your blue collar workers, well, we're still very focused on, I've got to succeed or I'm not going to have a job. I've got to hit a mark. I've got to
You're
hit
right.
a goal. And a lot of times, it ties into the almighty dollar. What's your sales goal, or what's your
Yeah.
office goal? What we really need to be focusing on is the more centered a person is,
Hmm.
um, the more productive they're going to be, the more motivated they're going to be, the more
Correct.
powerful they become with who they are, and they start attracting what it is that they are looking for, what you are looking for as a company.
Hmm.
But we are so still stuck in that, I've got to perform.
Yeah.
That I think that's where, I talk to a lot of people that don't, they know about mindfulness,
Hmm.
but they can't figure out where does that fit into my life, into my, especially as you said, into your profession.
Yeah.
How do you fit that in your profession?
Hmm.
And coming from somebody who was in a high powered sales job,
Hmm.
it's very, very difficult to to stop and say, well, I've got to do this, which is take care of me in order to better perform in my job.
Hmm.
Where your company is saying, no, no, you need to be here, you know, but
Yeah.
I can't be here if I can't get outside of my head because I don't feel 100%.
Correct. Correct. And it shows, right? When a person, especially in the sales role, right? Confidence has a lot to
Yes.
do with that. Your ability to be confident, not just in your product, but in the way you communicate, the way that you show up, your expertise. And when you don't have that and you're stuck in your head, that in and of itself can lead to burnout. Right? Because you
Yes.
become mentally exhausted. You're like, it's almost as if you're trudging uphill. As if you're
you
trudging
know,
uphill.
not only mentally, but physically, you're trudging uphill because as the more stressed we get, the
Hmm.
more higher our adrenaline is, the less clearly you can see the big picture, right? I
Exactly.
mean, the way the body is designed, the lion is attacking you, and what you see very clearly is an escape route,
That's right.
right?
Hmm.
But what you're not seeing is the beauty around you, the
Hmm.
everything else that's in the picture, and we lose sight of our life, of our dream, of our spark.
Mm. That's powerful. Losing sight of it. And it kind of brings me to a question because I think I look at these moments, these challenges as opportunities, right? Opportunities for us to learn, to remember, to discover things that we probably wouldn't discover before, right? We may have just floated along with it. And so it brings me back to I guess, 2 points. One is our definition of success, right? Because when we reach a phase of burnout, like, oh, so what do we define as successful, right? And what is our intention? Because
I
sometimes we
think
could be chasing something that maybe we don't really want and never
I
really
think
intended.
that is so key, and there are so many pieces to that when we teach how to rekindle your spark,
Hmm.
it comes down first to what is your intention?
Mm.
Because like you said, we identify success so often as financial or hitting that sales goal or that office goal
Correct.
or whatever that is. But success truly has to be the big picture because, and we lose sight of, I think, is it Simon Sinek who wrote, Find Your Why?
Yeah.
If
Hmm.
you lose your why,
Correct.
you lose so much. And I think this is where burnout starts to come in. We start to focus on the wrong things and we're putting our energy in the wrong place. So,
Mm.
what we need to do is come back to what is your intention? What is it? Where do you want to be in life? And then you look at what's the gap between this is where I want to be, but
Hmm.
this is where I am. You've got to find the gap in order to figure out, how do I get there? How do I get
Hmm.
back to finding and rekindling that spark? Because that spark that's in here
Yes.
is what's going to get you there.
Mm. It's the spark. Finding that spark.
And the
It's
spark is different for every one of us,
it is. It is, as is the intention and the definition of success.
right?
And I think sometimes we may get caught up in the kind of like the flow of, just a general path of life, right? That we can take, right? But it's not aligned necessarily with our sense of who we are as individuals and what we truly want to do. Right?
I was having this conversation with somebody that I met at a gathering just this last weekend.
Hmm.
And we were talking about this. We were talking about, getting in alignment with your spark.
Hmm.
What's your idea of success?
Correct.
And this woman said to me, but how do we even know who we are? And that is so true of so many people.
Hmm.
That's the question. We don't even know who we are anymore because we've been trained by society, that here's the box
Correct.
and this is our success box, right?
Correct.
But every one of us doesn't fit inside the success box. How many of us need to color outside the lines, right?
Yeah.
And so being
Mm.
able to take a step back and really identify who are you, and by looking at what are the core values that are important to you as an individual
Yes.
is how we get back to finding out who we are and what's important to us. And I
Mm.
think it's a super important step that we've forgotten how to take.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It reminds me. So I remember a time, and I wasn't burned out at this time. And although I've gone through my cases of burnout, but I remember the very first meditation retreat that I went to. It was in California, it was like San Bernardino. We're like out in the desert. And I remember it was like 3 or 4 days. And you get there and it's a silent retreat. And so you sit and you're sitting, I don't know how many hours throughout the day we're sitting. But what I distinctly remember is that in the silence, I remembered the things that I loved to do, and that I remembered that those things that made me feel like I was coming alive. I felt like I had to go through a process though. Maybe like Thursday, I was there and I was just trying to settle in and get my body adjusted. And then Friday, as we started meditating, it just started bubbling up. I was like, oh yeah, I used to wanted to go to France and you study at Le Cordon Bleu and become a chef. Like I remember distinctly all the things, kind of like the dreams that I had when I was maybe in college or when I graduated college. But the things I kind of said, hey, you know what? I'm going to focus on this aspect of my life or my career, and I'll get back to it. But what I became, I discovered was like that's the spark. Like those are the things that make me feel alive. And I think in sitting and allowing the distractions to dissipate, I got clarity of what it is that I really love to do and where I wanted to direct and be very intentional about placing my energy in those areas because that was the fuel to make me successful. It didn't feel like work. That was effortless, right?
Right.
That was effortless. And so I had to remember that. I remembered it through the silence.
And I think that because for me, that's one of the things that I do. Like on my website, I offer a free kind of self care checklist. One of the items that's on that daily list is taking a moment to do something that you love. And if you can't remember what that is,
Hmm.
then you have to just take a step back and go, okay, when I was a child,
Yes.
what did I love doing? What was it
Mm.
that made me laugh with joy, bubble up? What brings that feeling? Because chances are you still love to do that same thing,
Yep.
but we just haven't given ourselves permission to do it in so long.
Mm.
And that creativity is a huge step of, kind of rekindling that spark and finding that place of joy and remembering what that feeling is.
That part, the feeling of it, right? Because I think part of burnout also is, they have, like, I looked at the World Health Organization and they classified it, I believe it's like maybe three different uh, factors. And it says energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from, your profession, and reduced professional efficacy. And I look at it and I'm like, I get that. But what about the feeling, right? Like the feeling component of, I feel alive, of
And
feeling
really,
alive.
I really feel that that is a big piece of why we go into burnout, because we've forgotten what that feeling is.
Correct.
We tend in our society today, we tend to say, well, I don't have time for play. I talk to so many people and I say,
Yeah.
when was your last vacation? And they're like, oh, I don't have time to take time off work. Oh, you need to be taking time for yourself for play,
Correct.
because we do. We get going in a direction
Hmm.
and we forget that feeling.
That's
And
right.
I think that that's a huge part of when you're trying to get clarity on where do you want to be in your life. What
Correct.
is the feeling that you want to have in your life every day? So
Yes.
important, because everything is tied to that spark that we have. And when we have lost the feeling, we've lost the spark.
Yes. The feeling of it. The
The
feeling of
feeling.
it. Because I feel like it's one thing to, and I'm a huge advocate of journaling, right? Having those things out to memorialize them, to put them on paper and to keep looking at them. But then also for me, it's also okay. So, but what does that feel like? Because that localizes whatever I wrote into my body so I can carry that, that energy throughout the course of my day so I don't forget it. Right? Because I can close my journal and yeah, it's there and I have to go back and read it. But as long as I have the feeling in my body of what I want to create, then it actually makes it feel tangible to me. It makes it feel like I can have that.
One of the things that the verbiage that's coming out more and more in today's society is coming to a certain level of vibration or
Hmm.
energy frequency,
Hmm.
right? And for a lot of people who've forgotten what that is, getting there, they tell me, is the hardest part. And if you can really do a momentary visualization where you can just close your eyes and remember one thing that makes you smile, that puts that smile in your heart, then the more often you do that, the easier it is to come back to that feeling, to come back to that, yes, I'm going to be here. And, I can put myself in that energy vibration like that, just with that one visualization.
That's it. It's like a placeholder.
That's exactly right. That's a great way to
Placeholder for your spark. A placeholder for your spark. Don't leave home without it.
That's
Don't leave
right.
home
I
without
love
it.
that.
Now that's cool. So we talked about the importance of, when you're rekindling your spark, having an intention,
Yes.
understanding your definition of success, remembering what do you love? What do you love? And having that feeling, right? Doing visualization. Are there any other, I guess, techniques or approaches that that you've used with clients or that you recommend to really help people meet them exactly where they are? Because I know at times this can be a very, I don't want to downplay it. It could be a very difficult and challenging moment as well, and being able to see your way through it can be a challenge. So, what would you recommend?
honestly, in the very early stages, when you're recognizing that something needs to give, if you
Hmm.
will, I think the biggest thing is to find support.
Okay.
And you can
Hmm.
find support, through finding a coach. There are a lot of coaches out there, but you can also sometimes find support through a loved one, a friend, somebody that's willing to let you be who you are
Hmm.
without judgment and without trying to fix you or
Yes.
tell you the answers, because they're different for everybody. So
Hmm.
finding that support is super important, because what that allows us to do is, sometimes if you notice when you're talking to a friend who's super, non-judgmental, right, is that you can hear yourself.
Hmm.
And the truth is, every one of us has our own answer right here.
That's right.
We need to sometimes speak it out loud, whether it's an emotion that we're talking about, whether it's not holding those secrets in, right? We've got
Hmm.
to let them out so we can let go of them.
Hmm.
So finding a support system, somebody that will just listen. And that's, I'm an advocate. I have a coach. I believe in coaching, because you really get that non-biased space.
Hmm.
But, some of us have friends that are willing to do that as well.
It's a beautiful thing to have that community, to have that support. Sometimes it's just having a listening ear.
Exactly. Just somebody who will hold space for you.
Hmm.
And I
Always.
think, because we need to be able to pay attention to, um, be aware of what you're aware of, right? And if you just even sit for a moment and notice how your body feels in a chair,
Yeah.
how do your feet feel on the floor?
Hmm.
It'll teach you to start to be mindful, so that you can now tune into what you are feeling. What are you feeling? What do you need in this
Hmm.
moment?
What do you need in this moment? I like that. To become aware of that. Our preliminary conversation before, we jumped on here was talking about just becoming aware. And you were referencing, technology using, the oil ring to
Yeah.
really quantify and make clear and evident, how we are feeling. I think sometimes what happens, especially if we reach the stage of burnout, like I think for me, and looking back when I was burned out, there were moments, like there were markers along the road were like, hey, bro, you need to turn around. And you just go right through that stop sign, right? But when that becomes a habit and you create the pattern, I believe, and I can speak for myself, that I no longer recognized how I was really feeling, because I was so divorced from that space of just being feeling well and being able to identify or articulate how I truly was feeling. So I guess for you, I would ask, what are some of the the signs, one, and also the misconceptions about burnout? The
Well,
misconceptions about it. Yeah.
I think number one, the signs are when you start to see, and whether you see it in yourself or maybe you see it in a friend or a partner,
Mhm.
when you start to see behavior changes. Maybe somebody who's always been kind of calm and easygoing is starting to become short tempered,
Mm.
a little more volatile, a little less, tolerant. Maybe, you one of the things you mentioned is becoming distanced from your job, but
Mhm.
maybe you're disengaging from your family, your friends. You don't want to go out and, with your friends anymore. You just want to be left alone, right?
Mhm.
If these are behavior changes, these are things to pay attention to, because when we don't notice, life tells us things, right? And life will always show you what you need to see. But when we start to not pay attention to those signs, then our body's going to step in and show us.
That's right.
So if you start to need more space, you start to need signs of depression or fatigue, something like that.
Mhm.
Those are going to be signals that you need to stop and look.
Mm. Pull over.
Yes, pull over. You might need a little more gas.
Yeah. Trust, you have the time to do it. You have the time
That,
to do it. You have
that's
the time to
right.
do it.
Yes.
That's beautiful. One thing that I love about, your skill set is that you also, in addition to being a total well-being coach, and meditation and teacher, you also integrate Ayurveda into your practice, right? And so I would be remiss to not ask about the role of Ayurveda in terms of how you interact with your clients, and just understanding their natural state, and how that shows up in terms of maybe presenting with symptoms of burnout, and ways that they're very specific and tailored to meet them where they are, knowing their specific dosha and things like that.
I think that Ayurveda has been really beneficial. I know for me, Ayurveda was step number one on my own healing path,
Mm,
physically healing path, teaching me how to notice, how to notice certain things, learning mindfulness and self-care.
hmm
But yes, as you notice, as you learn your dosha, you will learn like each dosha, the three doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha. And I love that it was Dr. Patel that uses this analogy that the vata is like a hummingbird, always moving, always moving, and the more it's out of balance, the more you need to slow down, the faster that's going, right? You can't slow down.
hmm
The pitta dosha is a little more like an eagle, very sharp, very pointed. They're the ones that maybe where the anger is going to come out. And they're going to maybe not be such pleasant to be around. Um, and a kapha personality, is going to be more lethargic. Maybe they don't want to go out with their friends anymore. Knowing your dosha, knowing, the constant body constitutions
hmm
really can give us big cues, not only in what's going on, but how do we rebalance that? What do we focus on first to kind of help us to slow down, notice what's going on, and get back in touch with who we are? Ayurveda is such a beautiful practice. It's one of the oldest holistic practices still in use today. And so I teach a lot of Ayurvedic health, a lot of self care. Most of
hmm
my self care comes from Ayurvedic practices. And I just think it's so beneficial. And a lot of my clients tell me it's very eye opening, when it comes down to learning who you are and what we need to focus on.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. Being very pointed and direct, and having an understanding in terms of areas of our life that we just may not have a level of awareness. You apply the level of awareness to, right? I think having, going through burnout, it gives you that opportunity to be more direct and very nurturing of yourself in a very specific way where you need it the most. Right. That's why I kind of look at it as an opportunity. And it may, like I said, it can be very challenging time, but a beautiful opportunity to really focus in on what matters most to you, your sense of health and well being, and how you want to show up and live life.
100%. I'm truly believe that life gives us what we need.
Exactly.
And although none of us wants burnout,
No.
but it comes when we've stopped paying attention to what it is that we need. And it really is a huge, big stop sign in your face that says you're not paying attention. And now I'm going to yell until you
Mm.
pay attention to me, because we do need to take care of ourselves first. And we do need to make sure that everything we do is in alignment really with who we are in order to make the best decisions, not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Because if you're not in touch with really who you are, you won't make the best choices.
Well said. Well said. It's interesting. There's a quote that caught my attention the other day on Instagram. It says, "Better to admit you walk through the wrong door than spend life in the wrong room."
That
And I
is
think
100%.
and that's kind of what I feel like, when we blow through all those signs of burnout, right? It's kind of like, hello, you're in the wrong room. Like, I need you to go back. That's your higher self communicating with you, saying, hey, here's an opportunity to redirect, to realign, to reshift, to your point in the whole conversation, to rekindle that inner spark. Rekindle the inner spark.
Yes.
Yes.
And, for me, Ayurveda was that. Ayurveda was the first step to
Hmm.
teaching me that when we stop listening to ourselves, if you're not listening to the subtle signs, then they won't become not so subtle.
Mm, that part.
Yeah.
That part. It shows up. It shows
Yes,
up in
it
your life.
does.
It will show up in the most, to your point, the most non-subtle ways. The most non-subtle ways. I love it. I love it. So you dropped some gems, some really powerful jewels. Talking about intention, setting intention, understanding or establishing your definition for what is success, what makes you, what do you love to do, what brings you joy, and then also talking about Ayurveda, being very aware of our specific individual constitutions and the different self care practices that we can employ to really bring us into a state of balance and restoring balance in our life, particularly in a time if you're, you're looking to rekindle, your inner spark where, you may not have given yourself all the love that you need. And it goes back to a point to me as well in this journey was sense of worth, right? I always say to give yourself the love that you give to other people. For many of us, it's easy for us to give, but difficult to receive. I'm speaking for myself. I can't speak to everybody else. I can speak for myself and say it's easier for me to open up and be the most charitable and philanthropic person. However, do I allow myself to receive the love that I so freely and graciously give to other people? And not just saying that it comes from in kind, the person that I've given to, but give to myself, right? That's part of the journey as well. So if you can speak about that in terms of the self-worth and the deservedness for us to feel like it's okay to pull over and take care of me.
I think that's a beautiful thing. And that really also is part of Ayurveda is learning how to open your heart because, we think, like you just said, we think that opening your heart is giving, but really you can't give 100% if you aren't willing to accept because that wheel has to turn.
Correct.
And everything in our life, everything in Ayurveda is about, circulation, right?
Hmm.
And so we have to know how to express emotion,
Hmm.
not hold it in, but we also need to know how to accept love because that's part of loving.
Hmm.
Loving is giving, love is receiving. It's a two-way street. It's an
Yes.
unconditional two-way street. And we need to understand that we do deserve it. We deserve happiness. We deserve love. We deserve everything that everyone else deserves. We all are deserving because we're all one. And I think that that is a key is that when you withhold, you're unable to receive, well, then you're really unable to give as much as you want because what you are holding back from yourself, you're holding back from it, the
Hmm.
universe.
Hmm.
And sometimes we just have to remember that we are all one, that all of
Yes.
us are one universal source of energy. And if there's no flow, then it becomes stagnant, right?
Hmm.
And so we tend to lose, I think, when you lose your sense of who you are, your sense of spark. I think that's where we start to lose our self-esteem, our our confidence.
Hmm.
When you think about this, when you're doing something that you absolutely love, when you're fired up, when you can feel that joy, there's no hesitation.
That's
You
right.
are confident, you are strong, and you are powerful. But when you're doing something that doesn't feel right, you lose that sense of confidence
That's
and
right.
it shows. And I
Yes.
think that that's where our loss of self-esteem comes from is because
Hmm.
we've lost touch truly with who we are.
Mm. That's powerful. Losing touch of who we truly are. I feel like, when we unlock all of these different modalities, right? The intention setting, success, defining success, and then finding out what we love. I think at the foundation of it all is that we have to have that true level of understanding that we are worth all of that. Like you are worthy of the level of success that you aspire. You are worthy of the intention that you've set. You're worthy of the love that that makes you come alive. Right? That is the foundational piece. Because I believe without having that firmly entrenched into our sense of being, it's building a house on shaky ground. Because if you feel
Right.
like you don't deserve it, it's like, well, if I get it or not, right? It's kind of like wishy washy, right?
100%. And, part of what we work on in the Rekindle Your Spirit workshop and
Mhm.
program, the full program, is
Mm.
first of all, you've got to figure out what do you want.
Yeah.
Secondly, you need to know where you are.
Hmm.
And then we need to talk about what's in between.
Yeah.
How do we get from here to there? Because that's the limiting beliefs. Those are the
Mm.
things that say, I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
I don't deserve this. And believe it or not, we all have that. We all
Hmm.
have some of that. What are they, imposter syndrome, right?
Hmm.
And what we've got to do is we need to learn how to reframe that
There we go.
because the stories that we tell ourselves, and I love this saying, we all have a story, but you are not your story.
Hmm. Hmm.
And teaching how to overcome those limiting beliefs is an extremely important part of getting you to complete your goals, because
Mm.
a goal without action is a dream.
That's it. That's it. Breaking it down. Breaking it down. I love it. The stories, the limiting beliefs that we have. Uh, Michael Beckwith has a very powerful saying. He says, "A lie believed will operate as a law until it's identified and neutralized." Right. So actually going through the process of figuring out what did we tell ourselves or what do we start believing that is untrue or may not be serving us right now. How do we identify that? And then how do we go ahead and neutralize that to take that energy, reframe it, and recirculate it back into our being so that we can use it in a way that's more productive and creative and expansive as opposed to contractive and constricting. That actual process. Can you talk about maybe just some of the methods that you use for helping people to suss out some of those limiting beliefs?
Absolutely. I think there's a really powerful practice on identifying the meaning, what we assign the meaning. So
Mhm.
if something happens, we immediately attach a story to it, we
Mhm.
attach a meaning to it, and we tell ourselves this story, which is generally based upon something that has happened to us in
Yeah.
our past, right? In our history, these are patterns. And if
Hmm.
you think about it, it's like reprogramming the software.
Yeah.
And it is exactly that. We've got to first know what is the story we're telling ourselves about this.
Hmm.
Then you have to ask yourself, is it true? Is it always true? Because we go, yes, it's true because it happened. Well, but is it always true?
Hmm.
Not necessarily.
Correct.
And so walking yourself through that process of identifying, asking yourself the questions, and then how can you reframe that
Uh-huh.
into a more positive meaning, a truer meaning? And you'll know because it's like trying on an outfit. You put it on and how does it look? How do you feel in that outfit?
Correct.
So you take a more positive reframe of the story and you try it on for size. Does that feel valid? Does that
Hmm.
feel real? And it does come down to feeling, and then once you can put a positive, more reframe the
Hmm.
story and practice doing that. It takes practice. Nothing happens like that.
Yeah.
We learn how to reframe our own stories to find out what is the truth.
Hmm.
And then that is how we overcome the limiting beliefs. We've got to reprogram the software.
Yeah. Mm. I love it. Rewrite your own story, reframe your own story. There's some stories that have been handed down to us that we automatically accept without analyzing. And of course, that's energy.
Yes.
That's energy that can be limiting. For some, it can even be expansive. It just depends. But if it goes unnoticed and unexamined, right?
Right.
We don't know how it's how it's playing out.
And our brain is an amazing thing. And
Mhm.
so, what we've been taught as children, um, and, many times our parents were doing what they thought was best.
Absolutely.
And yet we took those stories and we made them personal. And we
Correct.
told ourselves, I can't, or I don't deserve, or I shouldn't,
Hmm.
um, when in reality, we should. And coming back to reframing things with the right practices, we
Yes.
can rewire the brain and we can change the way that we think from a negative focus to a positive focus, which will change your whole life.
It takes you from feeling maybe like a victim to feeling empowered,
100%.
to
A
feeling
hundred
empowered.
percent. And that is the change that needs to happen. Is that we need to find our empowerment.
Hmm.
And that is, really what it's all about. I think it all starts with gratitude.
Mm.
And I think that for so many people, I mean, a very simple practice is a gratitude journal, because we get so bogged down in the negative. You watch the news every time you turn on the TV or the radio. There's
Hmm.
bad news right here in your face all day long. We've got to remember the gratitude. There's beauty in the world. There's so much out there. There's so much love and beauty and success if we just open our eyes to it.
Mm. You said a world full of stuff there. Gratitude, gratitude. I mean, we need a phrase like I know in the news program, and they said if it bleeds, it leads. What is it for the good news? What's the tagline for the good news? Right? Like we got to figure out one so we can start sharing more things that we're grateful for and circulating. Like it's just more good news because I truly believe at the end of the day, the world is full of some really amazing and awesome people and awesome people. And there is so much more that we can be grateful for and articulate our gratitude. But we just, well, for whatever reason, maybe get bogged down in the day, whatever it is. But I really think that collectively, if we gave more attention to gratitude, that we would, to your point, we'd even feel better.
I
We would feel
agree. I agree. I think, and one of the things that I tell new clients all of the time, start a practice.
better.
I
Hmm.
don't care how hard it is. Every morning, write down at least 5 things that you're grateful for,
Yes.
because they're there. And the more that you focus on the gratitude, the more things are going to show up for you to be grateful for.
That part. That part. Gratitude journals. It says you have given us some gems. You have given us some gems. I mean, you've walked us through a variety of practices that we can use to really not just rekindle the spark, but to also to be keepers of the spark, right? To make sure that we are always attuned and aware of what brings us joy. Right. I love the idea of, a gratitude journal and identifying limiting beliefs because those limiting beliefs can and sometimes suffocate the spark. Right. As we grow, that we run into those limiting beliefs, maybe fear of, oh, wow, well, I'm going to pivot. I'll make a transformation. Right. And when you transform, you start encountering all these different beliefs. And no, you gotta protect that spark. You have to make sure that you nurture that spark within you. But part of that is dealing with those limiting beliefs.
I think 100%. I think that's where it's super important to have support,
Yes.
because the more that you grow, the more is going to show up for you to overcome.
Hmm.
And the farther you get on your path, the more there is. And maintaining remembering that, who you surround yourself with, and are you watching the news? Are you buying into, the drama that's on the television set all of the time? Or are you surrounding yourself with beautiful souls that are doing beautiful things, and at least shifting, to some degree? You've got to shift your life to shift your energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where are you placing your attention? Where are you placing your attention? Are you with people who also um, have a similar perspective in terms of wanting to grow and to develop and to be a part of a community? I always say we grow faster in community. There's reasons why I do not like going to the gym by myself. And if I do, right, you always get the gym buddy, right? You might even talk to him. It's just a point of contact in the mirror, be like, yeah, we're here together. Some sense of support. But I do believe, especially now, I've been saying this since, since COVID. I said before COVID, being in a community, at least in my perspective, was kind of like, it was optional. It was kind of like a luxury. It's like, yeah, I'll go to this place and hang out from time to time. Now, mm-mm. It is a requirement. It's an absolute requirement. I think that period of forced isolation for many of us made us go within. And in going within, we started to realize what's most important. And we also started to realize that, okay, there is just one. You alluded to that earlier, that we're all interconnected. And so the importance of being seen, the importance of having experiences and growing together, to me became such a priority. Not to say it wasn't, before, but it rose to the very top, if you will. And so just having that community to support that growth, that transformation, that rekindling has been absolutely, it's seminal. It's so important.
I agree. I think that we all need some kind of community. And I think that, we see a lot of people, even after the pandemic, who are not coming outside of their houses, who are not coming back into community. And I, for one, see that those people who are not coming back out into real communities are falling a little more into the depression mode, into the anxiety mode, because we need connection. We
Hmm.
need that human connection. It's part of who we are. We are a tribe. You've got to find your tribe. I think
That's
that
it.
that's a beautiful thing about life.
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. Got to find your community, find your tribe. And I honestly believe that if you just set the intention of finding a community that aligns with you and your core values, and you will absolutely find it. You'll meet somebody in the grocery store, or at the mall. It doesn't matter. It will find you. It will absolutely find you. But to your point, it is absolutely necessary. don't don't be secluded in the house. You don't have to do that anymore. Even if you find a virtual community, right? Like virtually, like what we learned through the pandemic is that we can still connect with one another, virtually, and still feel loved and seen and have the sense of belonging and feel inspired despite the geographical proximity.
I think it's a beautiful thing that I know that, during this Zoom world, I
Hmm.
have met so many people, and I have had the amazing opportunity to actually then go and meet some of those people in person. I
Yeah.
was just in Florida a couple of months ago, and I got to go have lunch and meet a person who I had met online. It was such an amazing experience to be able to literally hug the person that I love to chat with online.
Yeah. It's amazing. I'll say for the last, I guess maybe 2.5 years, been co-facilitating a Course in Miracles, and we got together like right. Yeah, it might still been in the pandemic, like towards the tail end of it, right? And so every week we're online, we're talking and just sharing and sharing in our lives and our experiences. And finally, the opportunity presented itself, maybe like about a year ago, to meet in person some of the people. And I will tell you, it was the most amazing sense of joy. Like, I'm talking like little kid joy. Like little kid with the little brown bag from the candy shop joy. Like it was just like, because I felt like I knew that person for so long, and it was such a very deep relationship, right? It was just hugs on site. It was
Yes.
hugs on site because we had invested in a sense of intimacy and vulnerability. And so then when you get the physical connection on top of that, and you're able to give the person a hug and say thank you, oh my Lord, I elongated my life at least by 20 years. It was the best. It's absolutely the best. So I highly recommend it. And you heard Bonnie. Bonnie does this day to day. She recommended go with it. Fine. Just set the intention. Set the intention, and you will find, as she said, you will find your tribe. You will find your tribe. That's so dope, so beautiful. Well, my sister, thank you so much for sharing your insight, your guidance, and helping people, rekindle the spark. Um, I definitely wanted to open it up, allow you to kind of just talk about, the actual programs that you're running. I know you have events coming up that you'll be doing in California as well. So just share with the people how they can get in contact with you and how they can access some of the programs and services that you offer.
Okay. Well, the easiest way is to go to the website of themindfulliving.space.com.
All right.
And there are lots of resources there. There's some free downloads on self-care, some questionnaires to kind of get a feel for where you are. There are the dates of some of the workshops that are going to be done. I've got one next week and one the week after online. And then in September, we'll be hosting a live one in Santa Cruz at the Ayurvedic Healing Center. And then for those who feel that it is what they need, I do have a 12-week program on rekindling your spirit that actually takes you step by step, more in depth into overcoming limiting beliefs, identifying, what are your core values, and really to help you have a long-term action plan to keep that spark rekindled, like you mentioned. So all of that information is on my website. Along with some other resources. And there is a place, if you just have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll love to answer questions and talk to you.
Absolutely. I will put Bonnie's contact information in the video description so that you can reach out to her and just take advantage of some of the programs and services that she offers. I like to be redundant and recap everything that she said in terms of the different tips and strategies to help folks. So just to go back, we talked about intention setting. We talked about the core values and definition of success. We talked about understanding and remembering what do you love, what brings you joy. She also talked about Ayurveda, understanding dosha specific activities and practices that you can employ. I'm sure she has a ton of that information on her website, not to mention identifying limiting beliefs, which is she helps you walk through that process as well. And last but not least, a gratitude journal. Some of these things we can start right here, right now, today. We don't have to wait until weeks later. We don't have to run another stop sign along that road to burnout. We could pull over right now and begin right where we are and start these practices. So, Bonnie, did I leave anything out? Are there any last words that you would like to share before we wrap things up?
I think you just did it, Andre. I think, the one thing I always like to end with is that same thing, gratitude journal. It's such an easy step. If you just need a place to start with gratitude because it will make an incredible difference in your life.
Well said. Well said. We begin and we end with gratitude. Bonnie, I'm thankful for you. I appreciate you. Thank you for saying yes, not just to doing this, having this conversation, but saying yes to the work that you're doing. I know you've made a significant investment in yourself and in your journey, and that light that you're shining shines brightly on us as well as you share your gifts and your talents and your experiences with us. So I give thanks for you, and I appreciate you. For those who check it in, I appreciate you as well. I enjoy these conversations and I look forward to our next one. We can have more in depth discussion about meditation, well being, transformation, and all those beautiful things. So until next time, I'll catch you later. Take care.